Story 1: The Passenger Who Knew My Name. I was on my way back from a photography assignment in the quiet town of Marietta, Ohio. It was early October, the air sharp with the kind of chill that seeps into your skin after sunset. My client had wanted moody riverfront shots, and by the time I finished packing my gear, it was already past 9. I didn't mind driving at night. Most of the time, it was peaceful. ND roads, faint hum of the tires, the radio tuned low. Somewhere past Parkersburg, I realized I was almost out of gas. My dashboard lit up with that orange warning glow, just as the highway narrowed into a winding stretch, flanked by woods on either side. No lights, no traffic, just black trees rising like walls. Siri told me the nearest station was still 15 miles away. 15 miles on a near-empty tank. Perfect. As I was calculating the odds, I caught sight of a figure standing at the shoulder of the road. At first, I thought it was just a post or sign, but as my headlights swung forward, the shape stepped into the lane. I braked hard, my camera bag tumbling off the passenger seat. It was a woman, mid-30s maybe, long dark coat, bare head despite the cold. She wasn't waving, wasn't asking for help. She was just standing there, like she'd been waiting. When I rolled down my window to ask if she was all right, she leaned close enough that I could see her eyes, wide, almost glowing in the beams of my dash. Without a word, she opened the back door and slid in. "Drive," she said. Her voice was steady, not panicked. Just certain. Now, I'm not in the habit of picking up strangers on deserted highways, but there was something final in the way she said it, as if she already knew I wouldn't refuse. Against my better judgment, I pressed the gas and pulled back onto the road. "Where are you headed?" I asked after a moment. "You'll see," she said, gazing out the window. I tried again. "Do you live around here?" She didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "Why did you stop?" Most people wouldn't. That unsettled me more than her silence. I didn't have a real answer. Maybe it was the way she appeared out of nowhere, or maybe because she seemed less like a stranger and more like someone I should recognize. We drove in silence for several miles, the gas needle sinking lower. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, but the dim light revealed only her outline, head turned toward the window. Then she spoke again. "You shouldn't take Route 33 tonight." My grip tightened on the wheel. "Why not?" "Because that's where they'll be looking." I wanted to ask who they were, but something in her tone made me stop. She wasn't warning me, she was stating a fact. When I finally pulled into a gas station, relief flooded me. A single pump, flickering fluorescent lights, an empty lot. I stepped out to fill up, but as I turned, I saw her reflection in the glass of the station window. She wasn't in the car anymore. Panic prickled across my skin. I rushed back, flung open the back door. The seat was empty. No indentation on the fabric. No trace she had ever been there. And yet, my rearview mirror still showed the faint outline of someone sitting in the back. I slammed the door and forced myself to finish pumping gas. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the nozzle. The clerk inside gave me a strange look when I paid. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. As I turned to leave, I froze. The woman was standing by the ice freezer outside the station, facing away from me. She raised her hand slowly, pointing toward the woods beyond the lot. I wanted to ignore it, to drive off and never look back. But when I slid behind the wheel, the passenger seatbelt light blinked red, though no one sat there. Against every rational instinct, I followed the direction she had pointed. The narrow road curved into a dirt path, trees crowding close, headlights barely cutting the dark. My chest tightened with the thought that I was driving into a trap. Then, through the trees I saw it, a small, abandoned house. The roof sagged, windows boarded, but a faint yellow glow seeped through the cracks. I stopped. My heart pounded. "I'm not going in there," I whispered. From the back seat, her voice returned, calm and near my ear. "You don't have to. You've already been inside." Cold washed through me. I had never been here in my life. Yet as I stared at the broken porch, something shifted in my memory. A staircase, peeling wallpaper, the smell of damp wood. Familiar. Too familiar. I blinked, and the glow in the house vanished. No lights, just a rotting shell of wood in the middle of nowhere. When I whipped around, the back seat was empty again. I didn't wait. I floored it, tearing down the dirt path until the highway came back into view. The passenger seatbelt light stayed on until I reached the city limits. Then, without ceremony, it clicked off. I never saw her again. But sometimes, when I'm editing photos late at night, I notice something in the corner of the frame. A blur, a shadow that doesn't belong. And more than once, I've sworn I heard a quiet voice behind me asking the same question. Why did you stop? Story 2. The Road That Didn't Exist. My name is Claire, and I'm from Portland, Oregon. 3 years ago, I took a trip that I still can't explain, though I've tried to rationalize it 1,000 times. I was 32 then, working in graphic design, burnt out from deadlines and desperate for a quiet place to recover. I booked a remote cabin in northern Vermont, tucked near a lake and surrounded by thick forest. The pictures looked idyllic: a glassy stretch of water, a little wooden pier, and a house with warm amber lights spilling through its windows. The rental price was suspiciously cheap, but the reviews were glowing, and I convinced myself I'd found a hidden gem. I left Portland on a Friday afternoon, landed in Burlington, rented a car, and began the drive north. The air was crisp, the mountains sharp against the fading sun. By the time I reached the last town before the woods, it was past 9 p.m. My phone had only 1 bar of signal, but the GPS still guided me onto a narrow, winding road. The trees crowded closer as I drove, their branches knitting overhead. My headlights cut a pale tunnel through the dark. After 30 minutes of nothing but forest, I began to wonder if I'd made a wrong turn. That's when I saw it. A green road sign, lit briefly by my headlights. St. Elda, 2 miles. I didn't remember seeing that name on the map. But the GPS confirmed I was still heading toward the cabin, so I pressed on. At the top of a steep hill, the asphalt leveled out, and that's when it happened. A man stepped into the road. I braked hard, heart lurching. He stood frozen in the glare of my headlights, his face pale, clothes oddly dated, a dark wool coat, tall boots. He raised one hand as though signaling me to stop, then seemed to realize something, shook his head urgently, and motioned me to turn back. Before I could roll down my window or speak, another figure appeared from the trees, a woman this time. She grabbed his arm, whispering something I couldn't hear, and together they stepped aside. He gave me one last look, his expression a strange mix of warning and sorrow. I drove past them slowly, pulse hammering. My rearview mirror showed only darkness. No sign of either of them. 10 minutes later, I reached the cabin. It was exactly like the photos, rustic, tidy, a little porch with a rocking chair. Inside, it smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. I unpacked just enough for the night and tried to forget about the road. But I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man's face lit in my headlights, the silent urgency of his gesture. The next morning, I decided to explore the nearby town. I assumed it was the St. Elda I'd seen on the sign. But when I drove back down the road, the sign was gone. I slowed the car, scanning both sides of the road, even got out at one point. Nothing but trees. Eventually, I reached a different village. Neat rows of white houses, a general store, a gas station. Inside the store, I bought coffee and struck up a conversation with the clerk, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes. "Is there a town called St. Elda around here?" I asked. She frowned as though I'd mispronounced something. "St. Elda? No, dear, not anymore." "Not anymore?" She glanced at the man behind me in line, then lowered her voice. "There used to be, long time ago. Wasn't really a town, more like a settlement. But that road's been closed for decades. The bridge washed out in the 70s. I told her I'd driven it last night, that I'd seen the sign." Her smile faltered. She shook her head slowly. "You must have been somewhere else." That night back at the cabin, the silence pressed harder. I sat on the porch with a lantern, staring out at the trees. I told myself it was just fatigue, or bad directions, or an old sign left standing by mistake. But then, faintly, almost like the wind carrying a voice, I heard it. "Go back!" It was barely audible, but I felt it more than heard it, vibrating in my chest. I froze, lantern trembling in my hand. The woods beyond the pier seemed to thicken, shadows shifting, though no wind stirred the branches. I didn't sleep. On my last day, I forced myself to return to that road. Daylight would prove I'd imagined everything. But daylight only deepened the mystery. The hill where I'd seen the man and woman was there, but at its crest, the asphalt simply ended. A rusted metal barrier blocked the path. Beyond it, only collapsed earth where the road had once continued. And just beyond that, through the trees, far down the slope, I thought I saw something. The faint outline of rooftops, sun glinting off broken glass. A town that shouldn't exist. I stood at the barrier for a long time, the autumn air biting my skin, until finally I whispered into the silence. "I saw you." No one answered. I never went back. Even now, when I drive at night and crest a hill, I expect someone to be there, standing in the headlights, raising a hand, urging me to turn back from a road that no longer exists. Story 3. The Road That Wasn't There. I used to drive the late shift for a small courier company in Portland. I'm 32, and back then I was just trying to make ends meet. Rent, student loans, the usual. Most nights were uneventful. I'd drop off packages to half-empty office buildings or lonely suburban houses, then head home through streets that always felt emptier than they should. I thought I'd gotten used to it. The humming neon, the silence broken only by my old van rattling down wet pavement, the occasional figure walking too slowly under a flickering street lamp. It all became background noise. Until one night the city decided to change its shape. The delivery that night took me to an industrial block near the river. Warehouses with boarded windows stood like hollow teeth, and the streets were so dark I couldn't even see the graffiti until my headlights washed over it. Package was routine, just a padded envelope, no signature required. I dropped it off and got back behind the wheel. It was almost 2 a.m., and the GPS told me to take a side street I'd never noticed before. The thing is, I've been working those streets for 2 years. I know every shortcut, every dead end, every alley where people leave burnt couches to rot. But on my dashboard screen, a street appeared that I swear wasn't there before. Mason Avenue. The blue line urged me onto it. I hesitated, but the city was empty, and I was tired. So I turned. Mason Avenue was too clean. No trash bins left out, no cracked sidewalks. Every house was dark, but their blinds looked too straight, like they'd just been drawn by the same invisible hand. The road itself was smooth, without a single pothole or oil stain, which was impossible in this part of Portland. I drove slowly, waiting for the GPS to tell me to turn again. Instead, The map froze. The glowing lines stopped moving, though the van rolled forward. I tried to zoom out. The screen glitched, then went black. That's when I noticed the mirrors. The reflection in my rear view didn't match what was behind me. In the glass, the street I'd just driven through wasn't empty. It was crowded. Dozens of people stood silently in neat rows along the sidewalk, facing the street, facing me. Their faces were pale smudges, details lost in shadow, but their heads tilted slightly, like they were listening. I looked back through the rear window. Nothing. Just the same immaculate houses, perfectly still. I kept driving, gripping the wheel so hard my hands ached. The road stretched on longer than it should have. The blocks weren't ending. No cross streets, no intersections. Just the same row of houses, repeating like a background loop in a broken video game. Then, finally, a stop sign appeared. My chest loosened. Maybe this was the way out. But when I stopped, I saw movement. A man stood under the stop sign. Not standing exactly, more like he'd been placed there. His clothes were ordinary, jeans, a windbreaker, but his posture was too rigid. His head turned toward me in a slow, unnatural arc, and though his face was dark, I could feel his eyes locking on mine. I blinked, and he was closer. 10 feet from the van. I slammed the gas pedal. The van lurched forward. For a moment, I thought I'd hit him, but the road was empty. I didn't look back. The houses blurred together until they simply stopped. I found myself at the edge of a massive parking lot, completely deserted with no buildings around it. Just asphalt stretching into the dark, painted with white lines that led nowhere. My GPS came back to life, but now it displayed only one instruction, in bold letters: wait. I killed the engine, pulse hammering in my ears. The silence outside was enormous, pressing in through the glass. Then I saw movement again. Figures began stepping out from between the painted lines of the lot, as though they were climbing up from beneath the asphalt. Men, women, children, all dressed like ordinary Portlanders, but their faces were blurred like overexposed photos. They didn't rush me. They didn't shout. They just walked, slowly, deliberately, toward the van. I tried the ignition. Dead. Tried my phone. No service. The figures kept coming, their heads tilting in the same curious angle I'd seen in the mirror. I locked the doors, though I knew it wouldn't matter. The next thing I remember is waking up. Not in the van. In my apartment. Morning light through the blinds. My phone buzzing with a message from dispatch asking if I'd finished my route. The van was parked outside, keys still in the ignition. No scratches, no signs anything had happened. But when I checked the GPS history, there was no record of Mason Avenue. My delivery log showed I'd made the drop and then gone straight home. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't told anyone at work. But last night, I looked out my window and froze. Across the street, lying neatly on the sidewalk, stood a row of people, heads tilted, waiting. Story 4. The tunnel that shouldn't have been there. I never believed in destiny, not really. As a civil engineer, my life revolved around measurements, maps, and concrete. But what happened 3 years ago in Portugal still gnaws at me in the quietest hours of the night. At the time, I was 41, single, and working on a project surveying abandoned rail lines. The government had plans to turn forgotten tunnels into cultural spaces or hiking trails. My assignment was straightforward: drive through a remote stretch of the Douro Valley, record the condition of old infrastructure, and file a report. The man sent with me as a local guide was João, a history teacher in his late 50s. He knew the mountains like the back of his hand. He was warm, almost too warm. Every introduction came with a story, every pause with a proverb. He carried a notebook filled with sketches of ruined chapels, war trenches, and tunnels carved during the dictatorship era. We set off in my rented van, winding through roads lined with olive groves and scattered farmhouses. It was early spring. Mist clung low to the river, and the sun was barely strong enough to pierce it. Joao insisted that before heading to the official survey points, we should take a shortcut through an area locals rarely used. I trusted him. He was the one with roots here. For the first few hours, everything was uneventful. I drove while Joao pointed at forgotten ruins, telling stories of smugglers and soldiers. But around noon, the paved road narrowed into a gravel path. My GPS insisted we were nowhere at all. When I asked Joao if he was certain, he chuckled. If the map shows nothing, it means you are finally seeing what others don't. That was when I noticed the tunnel. It wasn't on my plans. No registry, no engineering records. A dark, gaping hole in the hillside, framed with moss and collapsed stonework. An iron sign, rusted to illegibility, leaned to one side. I pulled the van to a stop. "This isn't part of the assignment," I said. Joao nodded. "Not on paper, but it is part of the valley. Every family around here whispers about it. They call it O Túnel da Voz, the Tunnel of the Voice." He explained that villagers claimed anyone who walked through it alone heard someone calling their name, even if no one else was inside. Some said the tunnel shifted, the exit never where you thought it should be. Of course, I dismissed it. Echoes, acoustics, paranoia. Still, Joao convinced me to at least take a look. We stepped out, the gravel crunching under our boots. The air was cooler, near the mouth, heavy with damp stone. I flicked on my flashlight and saw the tunnel stretch in a perfectly straight line. About 300 meters, maybe. Nothing extraordinary, except for the silence. No birds, no wind, just the drip of water from unseen cracks. We walked in slowly, the beam of my light gliding along the walls. Old railway markings were visible, faded white paint noting distances. At about halfway through, Joao stopped. He pressed a hand against the wall. "Feel that?" he asked. I placed my palm on the stone. A faint vibration, rhythmic, almost like distant machinery, but the line had been abandoned for 70 years. Then it happened. A voice, clear, unmistakable. "Daniel," my name, spoken in perfect English. I spun around, flashlight darting across the walls. The tunnel behind us was empty. Nothing but the van's faint silhouette at the entrance. Joao froze, his face drained of color. "You heard it too," I whispered. He nodded once, slowly. We pressed forward, our pace quickening. I told myself it had to be some prank, a vagrant hiding inside. But the tunnel was straight, bare stone, no alcoves. Every 20 steps, the voice came again. Sometimes from ahead, sometimes behind. Always my name, always calm, almost expectant. When we finally saw daylight at the far end, relief surged through me. But the exit was wrong. It didn't open to the valley we came from. Instead, the tunnel spat us onto a narrow ledge overlooking a gorge I had never seen on any map. The river below twisted in impossible angles, sharp bends like fractures in glass. Joao muttered prayers under his breath. I checked my GPS again. Nothing. Just a gray void where coordinates should be. The voice came one last time, right between my ears, whispering, "Left." And that was when I realized, throughout the tunnel, I had unconsciously stayed to the left wall. Zhuo, meanwhile, had drifted to the right. His flashlight beam suddenly winked out, as if swallowed. I shouted his name. No response. My own light caught nothing but stone. He was gone. No footsteps, no sound of slipping. Just absence. Panic seized me. I ran back through the tunnel, hugging the left side with every step. The voice didn't return. The air grew colder, the drip louder. After what felt like hours, the original entrance reappeared. The van still waited, untouched. But Zhuo never came out. I reported him missing, of course. Search teams combed the valley for weeks. They found no tunnel where I described it, only solid hillside, unbroken rock. The officials chalked it up to disorientation, grief, stress. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still feel that vibration under my palm. And in dreams, I hear it again. The voice, soft and patient, reminding me of the command I obeyed without thinking. Left. Story 5. The road sign that shouldn't exist. Evan Foster wasn't the kind of man to take detours. He worked as a logistics planner, the sort of person who measured his life in schedules, routes, and deadlines. But on a late October evening, when his GPS suggested a shortcut through a stretch of Pennsylvania backroads, he decided to take it. After all, he was only 3 hours from home, and the thought of arriving before midnight felt like a small victory. The sun had dropped, leaving only the gray smear of twilight. Evan rolled down the windows for fresh air, trying to stay awake. The hum of tires on asphalt was the only sound. That was when he saw the sign. It was old, wooden, and clearly hand-painted. Dalewood 3 miles. Evan frowned. Dalewood wasn't on his GPS, nor on the company maps he'd studied hundreds of times. He drove this region at least twice a month and had never once heard of the town. For a moment, he considered ignoring it. But his gas gauge hovered close to empty, and his phone had just dipped to 3% battery. A town, no matter how small, promised fuel, and maybe even coffee. So against his better judgment, he turned. The road narrowed quickly, the forest pressing in on both sides. His headlights caught glimpses of abandoned billboards, their paint peeled to illegibility. He passed no other cars, only darkened houses tucked deep into the trees, as if hiding. Then, just as promised, the town appeared. Dalewood looked wrong. The main street was lit, but not by modern lamps. Instead, iron posts held glowing bulbs that buzzed faintly, casting a sickly yellow light. Shops lined the street, their windows dressed with displays frozen in another era. Rotary phones, radios, mannequins in mid-century dresses. A diner's neon sign sputtered, flickering between heat and darkness. Evan pulled over in front of the gas station. Its pumps looked functional, though antique, with numbers on mechanical dials. A man in coveralls emerged from inside, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Evening. Need a fill?" the man asked. "Yeah, almost ran dry," Evan replied. The attendant nodded, moving with slow, deliberate motions. As he pumped the gas, Evan noticed something strange. The man never glanced at the car, only at Evan himself, as though memorizing his face. Inside to pay, Evan found the station lined with shelves of dusty products. Some of the logos he didn't recognize. Others were brands that had gone defunct decades ago. "That'll be 1843, the attendant said flatly. Evan handed over a 20. The man gave him change in old coins, their surfaces worn thin. Back in the car, Evan's unease grew. He checked his phone. No signal, not even emergency bars. He told himself to leave, to get back to the highway. But when he drove to the edge of town, he found another sign, Dalewood, 3 miles. It pointed back the way he came. Confused, Evan turned onto the main road again, accelerating until the town fell behind him. The forest thickened, the night pressing close. Minutes passed. His GPS, before it died completely, showed him looping in circles. And then, the lights of Dalewood appeared ahead. The diner's neon sign buzzed. The gas station's lamps glowed faintly. The exact same scene he had just left. Panic prickled at the edges of Evan's mind. He drove through without stopping, refusing to look at the figures he thought he saw standing motionless in the windows. Their faces seemed turned toward him, pale ovals in the glass. Once more, he reached the sign, Dalewood, 3 miles. This time, his headlights revealed something new. Scratched faintly into the wooden post were words barely visible. "Don't stop again." His pulse hammered. Someone else had been here. Someone who tried to warn him. Evan floored the accelerator, ignoring the narrow curves, the branches that scraped his car. The forest grew thicker, the road rougher. His fuel gauge dipped toward empty again. And then, the lights returned. Dalewood awaited, unchanged. The gas station attendant stood outside now, hands folded, as if expecting him. The diner's neon sign buzzed once, then went dark. Evans slammed the wheel, turning onto a dirt path that cut away from the road. Branches clawed at his windshield, rocks jolted his tires, but he refused to slow down. Finally, after what felt like hours, the forest opened, and headlights appeared in his rearview mirror. At first, relief flooded him. Another car meant escape. But the lights never closed in. They only followed, steady and patient no matter how fast he drove. Evan's tank hit empty. The engine sputtered. His car rolled to a stop in silence. The headlights behind him blinked out. And in the sudden, suffocating dark, he saw it. The faint yellow glow of Dalewood ahead, waiting for him, as if it had never left.